Zoom recording. Okay, I've got that. Okay, it is 7 o'clock. We're going to get started. Welcome back. This is our Tuesday evening Zoom class. I hope everybody had a good fall break last week. I hope you worked began work on the app tail, but you did have a little bit of downtime. Most of you did, and I hope you did get a little bit of rest and that you're ready to roll up your sleeves and get back to work. We have a lot to do over the next 6 weeks. I think 6 weeks. I think we have left. So we have a lot of work to do, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. How what it's going to take to complete the next 6 weeks successfully.
And Dr. Stedman, Dr. Lamb is joining us.
Okay. Welcome, Dr. Lamb.
Welcome. Thank you.
How are you doing? It's good to have you with us.
Good. I just got through my law class.
Okay. What I'd like to do over the next, just the next very few minutes, I don't want to spend a lot of time, but I'd like some feedback from Dr. Stone, Dr. Lamb, if he would like to, basically on what we saw with the final work of the APSL. Most of you have submitted the final APSL and successfully submitted it. We still have a handful out there, and we're going to move on after today. After we say this, we're moving on, and we'll grade your work, but you're on your own because we're not going to go back and revisit everything that we've been doing with the APSL. It's time that we move on, and you should be bringing that to a closure if you have not. But Dr. Stone, just briefly,
okay,
your words on the APSL, the finished product.
Well, the ones that I've looked at and the ones that I've had a chance to grade, I see a lot of thought going into it, and I'm beginning to get a better understanding of your thought processes. I'm really, as you are developing this paper and you're putting the different tasks together, you really are emerging. I see an emergence of you thinking like a leader. You think outside of your comfort zone of the classroom teacher. But sometimes the only thing that I would say is to be careful about is sometimes I see you losing that global perspective and going back into as a classroom teacher. And that's important that you keep focused on what the global picture is to me, because as you develop and you're in this program to become principals or hopefully an administrator at some point. So just keep that global development there. And because I read once or twice where someone goes back into my classroom or this is what we do in my classroom. So keep the global perspective. We're training you to become principals. We're training you to become administrators. So always put that forward as if you were presenting for that final interview that you're going to be doing. But I see you writing well. I see the transitions are working for me. And that's what I like when you put that final product together, that there are really clear transitioning statements about as you move from one task to the other. So I see some great work. Just be careful, don't slide back into my classroom. Keep it school-wide.
Okay, that's great. Dr. Lamb, do you have any, you've looked at pretty much all of their APSL work. Do you have any comments that you would like to make about the APSL before we move on?
One comment and one reminder. The reminder is this is how you're going to do business every day. That this is not a one-time thing that you would do one time when you became a school administrator. This is continuous improvement model. This is what you will do every year. You will look at your test scores every year, and you will set forth an action plan. We call it the Closing the Gap program. Every school in North and South Carolina every year has to have a Closing the Gap program to work on subgroups in their building. This is a continuous improvement model. That's a reminder. Learn it well, follow it, because you're going to have to do this every year. This is not just something we have you do. This is what you're going to actually do when you get in the role. Every year, you're going to have to do an APSEL every year. That's number one. The second thing is, and I brought this up in the faculty meeting last Monday night, I'm concerned that we go through the process and then in the end, when I look at the action plan, they don't fit the process. That your action plan is some canned program that your district bought that may or may not be an instructional program. That's not the purpose of what we're doing this for. A lot of districts buy programs, for whatever reason. Some of them are behavior, some are social, emotional, or whatever. But the APSEL is about learning. It's about teaching and learning. It's not about, some folks advance the argument, well, if kids behave better, they'll learn more. Nope. If you want them to learn more, you got to teach them more. Or if we address their social, emotional needs, their test scores will go up. Nope. Make sure that you understand that one of the constants in our business is if you want kids to learn more, you have to teach them more. And the APSEL is about teaching and learning. It's about what goes on in the classroom. It's about that instruction that happens there. There's a lot of things in terms of behavior, and so there's a lot of those kinds of things that are important. But the core of your instructional program has to be instruction. That's something that you can't forget as an administrator, that you can't make it on this program and that program, and we're always between programs, and we saw this in this school and we won't do it in our school. Do we have that problem? We don't know, but we like that program, so we're going to run it. In the business, we call that a solution hunting a problem. We're going to run this program. Do we have that problem? We don't care. We want that program. And you have to be in your schools that you don't just program all the time, but you're just going from this program. The core of any school is quality classroom instruction. Teachers and kids engaged in learning in the room. That's what the APSEL is all about. Don't forget that that's the core of what we do, and that is our core competency in public school, is the teaching and learning, interaction, engagement between teachers and students in the classroom. Don't forget that. And no canned program of any kind can substitute for that teaching and learning, that engagement in the classroom. And so that's my perspective is it doesn't do any good to work yourself all the way through the PLC process, all the way down to the action plan, and then the action plan is over here in left field at some canned program that your district has bought.
And Dr. Lamb, with the canned program, again, there's nothing wrong with programs. And remember when you did task 3 of the APSEL, and we asked you to look at 3 online or research-based programs, that was the place for those kinds of programs. There is just one resource of many things that you're going to use to improve student achievement. It shouldn't be the overall arching thing that you determine. And so it's just
if we had this program, it solves all of our problems. No.
Right.
Teaching and learning, it can be a part of your teaching and learning, but it can't just be your entire action plan. We're going to, what are we going to do in school? We're going to run this program this year.
Right.
That cheapens or discounts or devalues quality teaching. And remember, that's our core competency, is quality teaching. And you can't ever forget that.
That's right. And something that Dr. Stone said will segue into what I do when I start talking about the APTEL. But Dr. Revis, if you would unmute yourself.
Yes.
Dr. Revis wears many hats in this program. She is one of the outside evaluators, but not for 601. However, as a clinical coach too, Dr. Revis has been looking at work. She's been a part of reading the process. So Dr. Revis, as an outside evaluator, and they may have you reading their work later on. They won't know that, but you may be a reader of their work when they get to 603 or 605 because you wear those hats. And at some point, you may come back to 601, reading 601 work when you're not working in 601. But looking at what you've looked at so far, in just a minute or two, what would you say to them as they are going into the APTEL that they need to focus on and maybe think about doing differently, so that they don't make some of the same mistakes again?
Okay, well, first of all, first and foremost, and it's been reiterated many, many times, follow your template. That's first and foremost. And if you will do that and put the headings in that Dr. Stedman has given you for the helpful hints, you're going to be fine. Make sure what you write under the headings aligns with the heading. Check your APA style. Many of you are not taking the time to check your APA style for in-text citations. And have someone, try to find someone, doesn't have to be an English teacher, but an English teacher's great, to proofread your papers. Because I believe that it's very difficult for you to proofread your own work. Those are the hints that I would give you. First and foremost, stick to the template.
Okay. Thank you for that. And we will be reminding you of these things, along the way. And they have seen this feedback from Dr. Stone and me over and over again. This is what you need to do. I know it's like beating the dead horse again, but that's what we have to do. And just very quickly, looking at week 10, that that by the end of this week, and we're going to talk about it in a few minutes, the APTEL Task 1 draft is due in Blackboard's discussion board. That is going to be due Sunday night. Now, before we move on, I do want to I'm going to put Dr. Stone in the hot seat. Dr. Stone, I worked at the superintendent's office, but I was an assistant superintendent. I was not the superintendent of a school system. Dr. Lamb, Dr. Revis has worked in those capacities as well. Now, we understand that, that we all have, life happens, and that there's circumstances that will hinder us from always, something may keep us from having something that is due to be able to turn in right on time. But when it consistently happens, that is when there's a problem. We told you from the very beginning that you needed to take off the teacher hat and you had to begin thinking like an administrator. Now, Dr. Stone,
Okay.
if you have someone that works for you and they're consistently late with reports and work that is due to you, how would you, as a superintendent, how would you approach that? Because you work with principals as a superintendent.
And there are two parts to that, Dr. Stedman. Let me just speak to the question directly that you asked me. There are reports that are due. And when you have a report, when the principal has a report that's due, the central office is the keeper of those reports. But just remember, we're not just taking the reports because we like to get reports. We are getting the reports because we have to make a report to someone who controls the money. And so we may build in a day or two that we can allow for a lateness of a report, but oftentimes we don't have a lot of flexibility. And when you don't get your report in on time, if you hold up the district, then the district superintendent will get that call from the state that says, we don't have that report yet. Now, the state may forgive me once or twice as a superintendent, but it is going to get old to them just as it's going to get very old to me when you turn in reports that are late. Just remember, when a report is due, it is due. And if you don't have a lot of playtime with it, there may be a little bit, but when we say a report's due and when you are a principal, I may forgive it once or twice. But if you become systematically and you do it all the time, I am creating a file. And the next opportunity I get, I'm going to replace you because you are holding the district back. Because if I don't get that report into Raleigh on time, it makes me look bad. It makes Caldwell County Schools look bad, and I'm not going to allow my principals to do that. And so once maybe, and it has to be a very good reason, but these timelines are very much tied to something else. And just because the central office is asking for that fire report on the Tuesday, that means probably on Wednesday, I've got to sign my name to it and send it to Raleigh. And if I don't get it to Raleigh on Wednesday and I do it on Thursday because you're slow, I don't like that. And it really does reflect badly on you. And as a principal, that is I will guarantee you, if a superintendent wants to fire you and you send in reports late, that is good reason to do so. And that superintendent is not going to give you a lot of leeway on that. So to your point, Dr. Stedman, yes, deadlines matter because your deadline means that someone else has a deadline. And again, the central office and superintendents, we don't collect these reports because I like to sit on the weekends and read them. I'm collecting them because I have to send them to the state and I have a deadline. And I will not allow you to make my district look bad, nor will I allow you to keep doing and holding the district back. So it is important. Deadlines are critical. And that's one of the things that can easily get you fired for insubordination and for not following through on policies.
Thank you, Dr. Stone. And there was a purpose, a rhyme and reason for that. We were pretty flexible with your work with the APSL because you were getting started. We know that you were having to, but now we're going to be, our demands on you for the APTEL, we're not going to be as flexible, Dr. Stone, as we were with some of the things because we're treating you as potential administrators, the administrators that you want to be. So it's important that you work towards meeting deadlines. I want you to treat this work just as if it was a report that you were having to turn in to your superintendent. I want you to begin thinking that way as you are time management and the things that you have to do along with everything. We understand you're working, but we all worked too when we were getting our degrees. We understand all that. I was a high school principal. I think Dr. Lamb was too. We were all in very high profile jobs when we were working on our doctorate degrees. So we understand, but we still had to do it. I'm not going to say any more about that, but we are going to be looking at how you get your work, quality work, into us on time. And those of you that it was a problem with the APSL, we're asking you to rise to the occasion and to do better this time. With that in mind, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Stone, who has our topic for the evening.
All right. Okay. All right. Let me see.
Dr. Lamb, when Dr. Stone gets through, would you be ready to pull up the APTEL information for me, please?
I'm sorry, I should have had this pulled up. Dr.
That's
Lamb
okay.
would be all over me about it because he has always told me, have it down here at the bottom so it will be ready. So sorry, Dr. Lamb, I'm letting you down. All right, so I want to talk tonight about human resource management because it is one of the topics that as a principal or an assistant principal, you are going to very often you will have to deal with. So human resource development is also a part of your reading for this weekend, so for this particular week. So let's talk about it. It is critical. And in North Carolina, when you sit with the superintendent as a principal, and when you are an assistant principal and you sit with your principal, at the beginning of the year, you have to develop goals. And one of them that is required in North Carolina is that you have a goal on human resource development, which is standard 4 from the North Carolina Principals standards. It's standard 4. So standard 4 says that you've got to have a plan for developing, retaining, and keeping your human resources. And so let's talk a little bit about what that should look like and how you can keep, and developing your people. If you have followed any of the research or any of the current trends of education in this nation, you understand that we are at a critical point with our pipeline of teachers. It is no longer your goal is no longer just to recruit people, but just equally important, if not more important, is to be able to retain the people that you have and to develop the people that you have in your building. So it's more than just going out and getting them and recruiting them. So human resource development is a critical component of what you're going to do as an administrator. And as an assistant principal, you're going to be responsible for this too. When you are hired as an administrator, just understand that the development, the retention, and the recruitment of your people is essential. And that is going to be, it'll be a lot easier if you get it from the very beginning about some techniques and how to do this. One of the things that I saw as a superintendent, we always had exit interviews from people. When staff members were leave, whether they were teachers or teacher assistants or bus drivers, they were required to meet with our human resource department to talk about, well, why are you leaving? Now, many of them were retiring because they were of the age. Some of them were moving, their husband or their spouse was moving. But we always got a handful, and a good number, more and more it seemed, of people who were really willing to sit and tell us about why they were leaving. And 95% of the time, it had to do with you, the principal or the assistant principal. They didn't feel supported. They didn't feel as if you were that interested in what they were doing. You never visited that classroom. You never took time to understand them as a person. Or it could be your leadership style. So I'll say that to tell you that also becomes a part of your history with the district. When we're having these exit interviews, one of the things that I always look for as a superintendent was how many people are leaving your school? And for me, a sign of a struggling school or a sign of a school that's not doing well is when you have a lot of teachers who are trying to leave, a lot of teachers who are leaving, who are retiring, or a lot of teachers who are requesting a transfer. And that always generated a conversation with the administration. Why? And a lot of times the administration was kind of blind to the idea that it was them, that they were a huge responsibility for that. So I want to spend a little bit of time to talk about your role as a human resource development. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because I know I know you really want to talk about the APTEL, but realize this is going to be one of your major duties when you become a principal and even as an assistant principal. It's not about keeping your staff happy by feeding them biscuits, letting them go early on Friday. It's really about the whole development of your staff, making them feel they're valued, their opinions are valued, and then giving them some role in the governance of the school. So human resource development, it's more than just training the person when they're hired. It's also about developing those opportunities for people to learn the new skills. And it's really anything that particular person needs. So as a principal of your school, if you want your school to be successful, always stay focused on how you are developing your people. Because unlike many other resources like money and time, human resources is unlimited. How you develop those people. It's only how you choose to do it is what's limiting. So you don't have a whole lot of money and you don't have any more time than the rest of us, but how you choose to develop your people and devote your time into development of human resources, it is kind of unlimited. It really is all up to how much you put into it. So it's about training, it's about the career development, it's about their performance management, helping them to become better at what they do, because I'll tell you the days of just saying I can find a better teacher, those are gone. You're going to be lucky to find a teacher with the role that we're going now with fewer and fewer teachers. So if you have a teacher that's marginal, you've got to work with that teacher to get them to develop into a better teacher, because it's going to be a whole lot easier to develop them than to find someone brand new. You may be lucky and find that new person to come in, but it really is, we really are at a point in time where even if we have someone marginal, we've got to spend a whole lot of time developing that person. But now there comes a point when you have to say, this person is harming children. This person does not deserve to be in the classroom, and you have to cut the string. So just know that there comes that point, but it really is about developing them and managing them. It can be something as simple as providing opportunities to train formally, or it could be something as simply as observing others or modeling some of the activities yourself. Some of the features, of course, what you need to be doing with human resource development is you need to have some processes. You need to look at the individual needs of your staff members. And again, one of the things that we do well in public schools or any kind of school is we provide staff development. One size fits all. That's not going to cut it, because one size doesn't always fit all. I know if we were to ask you how many of you have sat through a staff development that was totally unrelated to you, but because one or two or three people in the building needed it, you all had to sit through it. That's a one size fits all, and that's not the best use of your staff development money, nor the best use of your staff development time. You've got to reach people where they are and develop them as much as you can. So human resource management is a full-time job amongst the many other different things that you get to do as a principal. But if you do this well, you will begin to develop other people in your building, other leaders in your building who will be able to do it well too. So it's going to be a shared responsibility, and it's going to make your school much more successful. People want to work in an environment where people are valued and you're developing your people. Some of the great advantages of it, of course, is that it develops some of that team spirit, and it develops competency. You're growing your future leaders, you're developing the organizational culture, and you are giving people the tools to be successful. It focuses on their welfare and the quality of life. So if you're one of those principals, and this is something that I mentioned to the 605 class that I was teaching tonight, I hope many of you, I'll get a chance to teach you as well in that, because the question came up about, what is the biggest mistake that a principal sometimes makes? And that's easy for me to answer, because I've seen it in more cases than I care to, is when you become that assistant principal, that principal, I've seen so many people think, oh my God, I've been appointed, I'm now God. And that you lose kind of your empathy with where you were as a classroom teacher or what the classroom teacher goes through. So once you become an administrator, you still got to keep your roots in the teaching field. Those are your people that you need to develop. You don't automatically become the smartest person in the building. Oftentimes you are not, many times you are not the smartest person in the building, but a smart person realizes who to go to for that advice, who to go to develop, and to develop those leadership skills. So it's a lifelong process of your staff development. Some of the benefits, of course, your people become more competent, your program people become more committed to the job, you develop that culture that you want to work in and that your people want to work in, and it becomes sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you have a highly successful school and you are leading it, the superintendent is going to see what you've done for that school. And for my next school, I'm going to give you another challenge to help that school develop as well. And for many superintendents now, there's some additional resources available to that. But we want you to develop your people so when you leave that building to go to a new building, you develop that culture and you're developing your leadership. So human resources is a critical piece of what you're going to do as a principal. It also helps the organizational effectiveness. It improves your people's participation at work. It makes people really want to come to work and be a part of that team. So real quickly, 5 easy ways to develop yourself, your staff. These are just some suggestions that were shared with me. Have times where you meet with them, whether it's one-to-one or 1-to-2 or 1-to-3. It doesn't always have to be that staff meeting. Having 45 people into a staff meeting, it's usually a give and take, or you talk and they listen, or someone reports. But the best way to develop your staff is to get out of your office, to walk around, to develop those relationships one-on-one, listen to people, and genuinely care about them. So it's getting out of your office. It's getting out of those formal meetings. It's becoming less and less formal. It's to make sure that you are sharing your vision with them, and that you share it often, and that you make sure that they understand it, but not only that you verbalize it, but they also see it. And that's the easiest way to develop your people, is that they know that you're committed to this, then they want to be committed as well. Always make sure that you are emphasizing communication, your branding skills, you're developing your school, what we believe, the culture of our school, how we want our school to be developed. When you get into 605, MELS 605, what are the things we're going to ask you to do is a quick little elevator speech that will help you kind of pitch that brand or pitch your school. Because if you aren't positively speaking about it, or if you're not given opportunities to brag about your school, no one else will either. So teachers kind of develop, and that's a good way to make your staff feel well. You'll get a chance to do that. Encourage people in your building, all employees, not just your teachers. And please don't get into the habit of just sending out emails to the teachers. make sure you also are aware that you have other classified people in the building. You have others who are working just as hard, making a whole lot less, who need to be supported and developed as well. And have some fun with it. Check in on them, help them, but not in a way in which you are trying to micromanage, but just double check. Coach them, help them when you can. Help them develop their ideas, help them to develop their leadership skills. Have quarterly strategic meeting. You are developing the tools in these courses to help you understand data and to have those action plans, to have those handy and review them, and of course to kind of keep everybody focused. All right. As I leave you, just with the thoughts of what else can you do to retain and keep your best folks, and I'll leave you with this just final thought, which I'm repeating. It is no longer just enough to recruit. The biggest part of your job is going to be able to retain good people, because they have many other options. They've got that school district, Charlotte Meck, down the road. They're paying $10,000 more. They've got another opportunity in the business world. So it's really about keeping the people, developing them, and really making people want to work for you. So be that kind of principal or administrator where people really, really do want to be there. And when they want to be there, they'll also carry that over in the classroom with their kids. And the kids will see it and they'll know it too. Any questions for me on human development? It's critical. It's one of the things that we evaluate you on. And at some point, you will sit across from your principal or your superintendent, and he will ask you, or she will ask you, what are you doing? All right. Okay. Dr. Stedman, thank you.
Okay. And Dr. Lamb, if you'll go ahead, if you would pull up.
Oh, I need to stop sharing.
Okay. Pull up the APTEL information. While they're doing that, a lot of what you said, Dr. Stone, segues into some of the initial work that they're having to do with the APTEL, which I'll focus on that when we get to it. But while Dr. Lamb is pulling this up, I just want to remind you, this is evidence 2. It's an analysis and action plan for teacher empowerment and leadership. One of the things that I want to stress again, over and over again, is I know most of you are still in the classroom, working in the classroom. Some of you have other responsibilities, but as you are moving forward and you are doing the activities and the task involved in the development of the APTEL, you must take off that teacher hat. You must put on that principal's hat. And as you are analyzing things in the school, and as you are building towards that action plan to improve these areas for teachers and to make them lead, you've got to think of it from the principal's perspective. So as much as you can, even when you're researching, when you're writing, do not look at it from the eyes of a teacher, a classroom teacher. You must look at all of this from the viewpoint of how a principal would look at things and how they're going to make a difference. Again, we've gone over this already, but I think it's important that we look at task 1, prompt 1 again. And you see that there are under prompt 1, you're going to conduct a literature review with bibliography reflecting various teacher empowerment and leadership best practices. I've had several people over the last week and a half to either call me, to send me emails or whatever, and again, they were specific about some of the things, but what I told them was what I just told you. Look at everything you do, from the lens of a practicing administrator, and when you look at the research that you do, make sure that is your focus. Number 1, and this is on your. I had another student to communicate with me, and they said, in your helpful hints and in the template, it identifies the headings as, like, number 1, building efficacy and empowerment among staff. The thing that you've got to remember is that there's a reason why it's set up like this, and when the evaluators look at it, they're going to look for that heading and they're going to focus on. If you put it all together without your headings, then they're not going to be able to find, they're not going to have the time to look for it. And the reason we ask you to put the headings there is so that when it gets to that point, that the evaluator can quickly look at that, and they have a checklist or a template that they follow to make sure that you've covered everything that you have to cover. So while I understand that some of you would like to write it just narratively and let it flow from one thing to the next, the reason we do this is so that it is easily identifiable. Dr. Lamb, you have any comments on that before I go any further?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, we've told you, make it easy for your reader, your evaluator. Have those headings. Dr. Revis mentioned that first thing she mentioned. You know, we're looking for these sections, and we're going to read those. And so, when she or somebody else goes to grade one of these, this grading rubric pops up, and they have certain things that they're looking for. And if they have to hunt them, as you can see, these are the things that they're looking for, but they're going to go right down the line. They've developed their own little grading rubric that goes along with this. And if they don't see a heading that says building efficacy and empowerment, if they don't see these headings, they just see some big narrative. That's not going to go well for you on the grading, although you've done the work. Make it easy for them. Now, these folks, they set aside between 20 and 30 minutes to grade one of these. That's what they get paid to do. They're not going to spend 2 hours going back and forth, rolling, checking, going back and forth, looking, hunt. They're going to give you 20 to 30 minutes, and that's what you're going to get. And the quicker and easier you make it for them to grade your work, the better the grading's going to go. So you all did really well in your app cell where you said PLC research, PLC selection, PLC meeting. It's the same thing here. We expect to see these bullets in prompt 1. You've got to have something that addresses each one of these. And if you don't, if you just have one big flowing narrative, you will be graded accordingly.
Thank you, Dr. Lamb. And another thing, what Dr. Lamb showed you just previously was it showed you, and you have this information. It shows you what you have to do to have an accomplished document. Now, that's going to be, once it gets to the evaluator, they're going to look at all of those areas. But if you don't have everything under that, then the minimum, you've got to be at least minimally proficient. Anything below that means that it's not going to be able to go to the evaluator. So when Dr. Stone and I are looking at it, when we're giving you a grade, we're trying our best to get you to an accomplished document. And that's why we provide you with feedback, and your clinical coaches tools will provide you with feedback and tell you this is what you need to do. Now, once it gets back to you, if you choose to not listen to us and not to do, then we're trying to get you to accomplished, but we're going to at least get you minimally to proficiency, because that is what it's going to take before it can be submitted to task stream. So we're going to do everything we can to help you get there, but ultimately it's left up to you whether it gets there or not. In those 5 headings under task 1, the first one is your heading is building efficacy and empowering among staff. I had the question asked of me. They said, well, Dr. Stedman, we talked about efficacy in the answer. Yes, you did. But efficacy covers a lot of areas. There's efficacy among students. There's efficacy among teachers. You're looking at efficacy in a different capacity this time. And there's lots of research out there. And even though you did research back there with the APSL, then this is just giving you an opportunity to take your research to a different level. And as a building administrator, as the leader of the school, your thinking should be, as the principal, I'm ultimately, your job as a principal, and I think, Dr. Lamb, you've said this before, we really don't have a whole lot to do with actual student success in that classroom. That's a teacher's job. Our job is to make sure that we've got quality and effective teachers in there to work with our students so that they can achieve in that classroom. So we really can't take a whole lot of credit, if a classroom gets all fives on the EOG, that teacher's done an excellent job. Our job as administrators is to make sure that our teachers are quality teachers, that they're empowered, that they feel good about what they're doing. So you're really the coach of all the teachers at your school. So when you're writing this, when you're looking at the research, think of it from the principal's perspective. If I was the principal of this school, what does the research say I need to do to improve efficacy, to make people feel good and want to be here and like to be here and enjoy what they're doing day to day working with our students? And as the principal, what does the research say that I need to do to empower my teachers and staff? Secondly, results-oriented professional development. Your job as the leader of that school is going to be to provide staff development that's going to first of all, is going to empower your teachers. It's going to improve their teaching skills, and ultimately everything that you do with your staff development, the end result should be that you are empowering your teachers, you are improving their teaching skills in the classroom with whatever you're providing, but the end of the day is going to improve student achievement. Remember, everything is always going to revert back to how we started in that apsal. So when you're looking at what does the research say as an effective leader in your school, what are some of the things that you can do to set up professional development in your school that's going to give you the results that you want? That's the literature review for that part. And then third, and Dr. Stone, this you hit the nail on the head with this. Dr. Stone's presentation talked about recruitment, placement, and mentoring of school staff. As the leader of that school, it's your job to find good, effective teachers. And once you get them, Dr. Stone said they're not standing in line out there knocking on the door, to come to your school for the most part. Once you get them, what are you going to do with them to keep them? What are you going to do with them to make them better at their craft? If there are weak areas, then, what are you going to do to help improve those weak areas? Again, Dr. Stone did an excellent job providing information on that. It's your job. What does the research say? Again, that's what your research is there. Fourth, approaches to and for evaluation of school staff. Again, as the leader of the school, this is where your job is to make sure that teachers are doing what they're supposed to do. How do you know they're doing what they're supposed to do? How do you know that what is supposed to be going on in that classroom is going on in that classroom? So your job is, what does the research say as the leader of that school? What are some of the things that you need to be doing, the best practices for evaluating the school staff, to look at the strengths, the weaknesses, and to build on them for total overall school improvement. I'm trying, there it is. And then number 5, the heading is going to be teacher leadership and decision making. Again, what does the research say about creating teacher leaders in your school and allowing them to be a part of the decision-making process. Again, all of this goes back to the first thing that we talked about, building efficacy and empowerment among staff. You talk about it at the beginning, and then it breaks down all the way to the end. The research ties together, but it's all talking about some specific things. Now, Lamb, while I catch my breath, you have any comments on those 5 areas?
Well, I just want to remind you, efficacy means building effectiveness and empowerment. And people tend to be much happier and much more pleased and much more satisfied if they are effective. Most folks don't get up every day and say, I think I'll go to work and be ineffective or incompetent today. Job satisfaction comes from your job and how well you do your job. And so efficacy, one of the synonyms for efficacy is effectiveness, building effectiveness, and that's classroom teaching. And empowerment is, there's empowerment in 2 ways: empowerment as a classroom leader, empowerment as a school leader. You got to remember that as you go into this. We're talking twofold here. But if you want teachers to be effective in the classroom, you reward them. You make them happy with empowering them as leaders in the school. That's what Dr. Stedman was talking about. How do you make them happy? How do you make them want to stay? And that's what Dr. Stone was talking about. You find ways to reward them with leadership and responsibility and decision-making in the school. That influences them to be great teachers in their classroom. And that's efficacy, is effectiveness in the classroom. The way you get that is that you empower the people in your building who are great teachers. And you have a staff development plan to get them to be great teachers. But you want the culture of your building to be one of teaching and learning. That great teaching is rewarded in this building. And if you do that, you'll have more great teachers. But you've got results-oriented professional development is what Dr. Stone was talking about. You've got to get them staff development that meets their needs. And so all of these things work together. This is a system that we're talking about here. You can't just do these as one-offs. You've got to understand how all this works together. And that's my
Dr. Lamb, and we're going to go on to prompt number 2. You said something when we had our town hall, back. You said something when we had our town hall, and I don't know, can't remember what it was, but it was, I should have written it down and I didn't. But anyway, talk to them briefly about what is the difference between the checklist and the survey that they've got to do.
All right. So the notion here is we're trying to measure what they're doing in their classrooms, how efficacious or how effective they are in their classrooms. And we can't do that with a survey because they'll all tell us that they're using best practices.
Right.
So you either use a checklist like Marzano for best practices or your district's walkthrough document to check to see how effective are they being in the classroom. Where are they? Are they good teaching? Is good teaching going on? And then the survey is what opportunities are they getting to fulfill leadership roles in that building? And the notion here is this: in buildings where the best teachers get opportunities to be school leaders, there'll be more best teachers. In buildings where leadership positions are doled out on seniority or eeny, meeny, miny, mo, you won't, there's no impetus, there's no advantage, there's no gain in working hard to become a great teacher if you're not going to be rewarded for it. You're going to get paid the same whether you are or whether you aren't. And so the notion here is to encourage and support and reward great teaching. And if you do that, and the reward is leadership positions throughout the building, and here they are, you get to have input or teach professional development. You're involved with the school improvement plan, setting school-wide policy, that's curriculum, get involved with the budget, how the money is spent, and get involved with hiring. Those are reward positions. Those are teacher leader positions that are reward for being a great teacher. And so if you do that, you set a culture in your building of teaching and learning. But again, you cannot survey for best practices. You are going to go out and look to see what's going on. Again, you're only going to do 2 or 3. You're only going to do 2 or 3, but you're going to ask the principal, how many teachers in the building use best practices, and where are they lacking in those? Because they know, because they do walkthroughs every day. We're having you do 2 or 3 walkthroughs just to understand what the process is. The data will come from your principal. You know, and it doesn't have to have names attached to it. You know, how many teachers in our building consistently use best practices as measured by the walkthrough checklist that you use to do walkthroughs. And that's where you develop your staff development plan. Your staff development plan is going to have whole group, it's going to have small group, PLC, and it's going to have one-on-one. Those are going to be the components of your staff development program. And what your principal tells you basically, well, if the principal says hardly anybody in our building uses best practices, we got to do a lot more whole group. Or if he says, or she says, about everybody in our building uses best practices, then we're going to do less whole group and more one-on-one coaching with our new people. And then you ask, well, which of the best practices do we really need to focus on? That's what you do in PLCs. You share non-linguistic summarizing and note-taking. You share examples of reinforcing effort and providing recognition, non-linguistic representation. These are the kinds of things you work on in small groups in the PLC setting. So your professional development plan should have some element of whole group professional development. That's for things that not a lot of people are doing very well or very much of. Should have some PLC work on individual best practices, and should have some one-on-one for either your low performers or your new people, who are pretty much the same people. So that's what you're doing here, is you're going to develop a staff development plan, a professional development plan that has the 3 different kinds of professional development: whole group, small group, one-on-one. That's from Linda Darling Hammond. Those are the 3 types of staff development. But you are going to ask your principal, and you're going to develop it out of that, but you're going to go do some of these to see how the data is collected. It's important that you know how they came to the decisions when they said to you, 75% of our teachers use best practices. You need to know how they got that data. I mean, you need to understand the collection process.
Dr. Lamb, the question is, it says prompt 2 states the candidates will create a checklist, yet it also states that our checklist should not be made up. Could you clarify this for us?
There's no clarification needed. You go find one. You create one from one you found.
Remember, it's got to be valid and reliable based on.
I mean, we don't mean create one from scratch.
Right.
If you don't have one, if your district isn't using one, you pick one.
But if your district has one, then we highly recommend that's what.
Use it. But if your district doesn't have one, then you pick one. You create one for yourself to go out, but it can't just be you made it up. It doesn't say make one up. We want you to use one that's already been created and validated. Been created, and you do that, but you don't make one up on your own. You find one through your research. That's why you're doing your research.
Okay.
Now, again, these prompts come this way. We don't write the prompts, but we tell you what they mean. I would change the language on that one, but that's not in my purview to change that. And so please remember, don't make one up. You've got to reference it. You know, you hear me all the time. This is Marzano's checklist. This is Whitaker's survey. I mean, you know, we make sure that you understand all the time. None of us made these up. We're using research here So don't get confused over the word create. It does not mean make your own up.
And just remember, checklist is inside, survey is outside. Checklist, what is happening inside that classroom as when you look at the survey, what is happening with teachers outside the classroom as far as leadership opportunities are concerned. Inside,
That is
outside.
correct.
Easy way to remember it.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Lamb, let's move on to task 2. I know that, and the reason I want to move on to task 2, it's going to take more time working on task 2 once they get task 1 completed this week, and they do have a couple of weeks that they will be working on this because of the time element involved, but I want them to see how all of this ties together. In task 2, the candidate will use the instruments from task 1. You're going to actually collect the data in task 2. Using the survey from task 1, you're going to analyze the results for teacher perception of empowerment and leadership in the school. In addition, you're going to collect data in the school over a period of, remember I said, 5 routine days. This is where you're going to do your qualitative research, and you're going to actually observe. You're going to talk. You're going to ask questions. This is a part of gathering the data that you're going to be using. You're trying to get your thumb on the pulse of the school as it relates to the teachers. You're encouraged to conduct informal interviews with teachers as well. Once you have collected your surveys and analyzed results and have completed the 5 days of observable practices in the school, you're to respond to these results narratively by addressing the 5 items in prompt number 1. Again, remember we talked about those 5 items in prompt number 1. We said you started out with building efficacy and empowered among staff. Next one was results oriented. These are the same identical topics. However, the difference is back in initially, what does the research say? This is what the research says for each of these 5 areas. Now you will have spent a minimum of 5 days observing in your school, 5 days doing walkthroughs, 5 days asking questions, interviewing, 5 days talking to your administration, as much as you can gather. Okay, the research says this. Now you're coming back after you have done all of this, and you're going to look at building efficacy and empowerment among staff. That is what does it look like in my school based on what I've done over the last couple of weeks. This is what is actually happening at X school. With professional development, this is actually what I found out. When it comes to recruitment, placement, and mentoring of school staff, this is exactly what is happening in my school. And you need to be very candid about it. If you're not candid about it, if you don't tell it like it is, then when you get to the action plan or the professional development plan that you've got to work for staff development, it's not going to mean anything if you have not been honest at this point. Approaches to and for evaluation of school staff, teacher leadership, and decision making. Again, those 5 areas at this point, based on my observations, based on the checklist, based on the survey results, based on my questions, everything, this is what is happening at my school. Anything, Dr. Lamb, Dr. Stone, that you'd like to say at this point?
No.
Okay. No. Then you get to prompt number 2. After you've narratively talked about what you saw. And prompt number 2 is you're going to, there will be some narrative work with this, because remember when you do figures, when you're showing something, we should always understand what are we looking at. But this is where you're going to graphically represent everything that you have researched, everything that you have found. You're going to talk about the, you know, your survey results. You're going to show that in graphic form. You're going to with the walkthroughs that you did and the walkthroughs that have been done by your administration. Because remember, you can't find out in 3 walkthroughs, you know, what is or is not going. You're going to have to talk with your administration to find out, you know, as you do your walkthroughs, will you share with me for my research, what do you see? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What are the things that we need to do? Because that is going to help better build your case for the plan that you're going to be building in task 3. Again, you're going to provide graphic and narrative data for your personal walkthrough experiences as well. Anything that you'd like to add to that, Dr. Lamb or Dr. Stone, at this point?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay.
Good.
Well, that's it. Just a reminder, you need to make sure that you are planning out your time. You know what's due this week, but then you know what you've got to do with task 2 over the next couple of weeks. You need to plan out your time wisely. You need to, if you haven't talked with your administration, you need to take care of that. I would take care of that tomorrow. You need to let them know this is what we've got to do. You know, how can you fit me in your busy schedule? What you need to find out what you can and cannot do, what they're going to allow. Just don't take it on yourself and do something that's going to get you in trouble. Make sure, and they're going to allow you, but just make sure you get the permission to do the things that you're doing. They need to be aware of what's going on. Just a reminder, Dr. Lamb and I will be coming on, and I'm sure others will be joining us, but we will be coming on Thursday night at 7 o'clock, and we will address any questions that you may have at that time about the APTEL, but we're also going to be talking about some task stream requirements at that time, and anything else that Dr. Lamb feels like that we need to cover as well. With that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Stone, and Dr. Stone has the benediction this time.
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of ironic that you and Dr. Lamb are going to be on Halloween, the night of Halloween. So join in for your trick or your treat. So whatever it might be. But I just want to leave you with the thought that we've been talking about building teacher efficacy, and all this as it relates to this particular evidence. Just think about your favorite administrator, how they made you feel and how they valued you. And then also think about the one who was your least favorite. And I think you'll see there exactly what you should be shooting for as you become an administrator. So keep in touch. Let us know how we can help you. We'll see you Thursday night, and take care. Have a great week.
Okay, and I will have this information out to you later on tonight. Okay, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.